I stood in Bryce's office trying to absorb what he'd just said. Pack your things. Your role has been eliminated. The dismissal hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd sensed it coming for days. 1 week after Verity's funeral, and now I was being pushed out. The timing was anything but accidental. I kept my face perfectly composed despite the storm twisting inside. I understand. We'll need all client information transferred immediately, he continued, nudging a folder across the desk. Especially any accounts you've been managing personally. I nodded, taking the folder without opening it. Of course, he added, leaning forward with barely concealed urgency. We'll also need specifics on the West Coast clients. Verity mentioned them before her unfortunate passing. That's when it became undeniable they had no clue she'd formally reassigned the entire 1.2 million portfolio to me 3 days before her heart attack. No clue I had already mailed in my quiet resignation that same morning. I'll gather everything, I assured him with a pleasant smile. Bryce looked almost disappointed by my steady reaction. He'd prepared for tears, maybe begging. Instead, he got professionalism that clearly unsettled him. You have until the end of the day, he said, waving me off. I stepped out of his office, moving past the curious stares of coworkers who had obviously been whispering about my closed-door meeting. Some quickly looked away, uneasy with knowing my fate. Others watched with thinly veiled satisfaction, one less rival on the corporate ladder. At my desk, I began slowly packing my few personal items into the small cardboard box HR had thoughtfully placed there beforehand. How considerate of them to have it waiting. Nell from accounting approached, her voice low. Is it true they're letting you go? Apparently, my job has been eliminated, I replied, carefully wrapping the small crystal paperweight Verity had given me for my 3-year anniversary. That's absurd. You landed that massive Coastal Solutions account just last month. I shrugged. Business choices rarely make sense from the outside. What I didn't say, this was exactly what Verity had predicted. Exactly what we'd prepared for. 6 months earlier, Verity had called me into her office late one evening. Everyone else had gone home, the floor quiet except for the faint hum of the cleaner's vacuum. Kenna, she said as I stepped inside. Close the door. I followed her instruction, settling into the chair across from her desk. Verity shifted her computer monitor aside and slid a glass of water toward me. I've watched you outperform everyone for 3 years, she said, her direct gaze as piercing as ever. Yet they keep overlooking you for promotion. I sipped the water quietly. 5 years at the company, and despite bringing in more new business than anyone else, I remained stuck while less capable men climbed upward. The executive team has a particular vision, she continued, choosing her phrasing with care. And apparently, we don't match it. What she didn't voice, but we both understood, was that the all-male leadership protected their positions through a tight network of favoritism. My boss had slammed into the glass ceiling so hard she'd stopped trying to push past it. I'm dying, she said bluntly. Cancer, 6 months, maybe less. I nearly choked on my water, setting the glass down with trembling fingers. When I'm gone, they'll tear apart my client relationships like scavengers. Unless, she explained her plan, she would quietly introduce me to her most valuable clients, the West Coast portfolio worth $1.2 million in yearly contracts. But officially, these meetings would look like standard support work. They're watching the big accounts, she noted, not the scattered smaller ones that collectively matter most. For months, we operated together in plain view. I met with creative entrepreneurs, boutique manufacturers, and innovative startups across the coast. Verity presented me as her right hand. The clients trusted her judgment. Meanwhile, around the office, the whispers started. Spending an awful lot of time with Verity, one coworker remarked loudly as I walked past the break room. Probably angling for that promotion, another added with a laugh. My immediate supervisor, Bryce, started asking for odd reports, probing with pointed questions about client meetings. I gave him just enough detail to keep him satisfied without exposing what we were actually doing. 2 weeks before she passed, Verity completed the paperwork. Legal transfer of client relationships, fully notarized. She even covered the transfer fees out of her own pocket. "They'll come after you once I'm gone," she cautioned. "Be prepared." The day she died, I wept real tears. She had become more than a mentor. But beneath the grief, her strategy was already unfolding. At her funeral, the executive team performed their grief flawlessly. Bryce placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch unwelcome and stiff. "Such a loss," he said. "We'll need to discuss shifting her account soon." I nodded, eyes lowered. Whatever the company needs. That evening, I received a text from the CEO. "Meeting tomorrow. Bring complete client list." I stayed up all night preparing 2 separate sets of documents. One contained every client except those in the West Coast portfolio. The other was my resignation letter, effective immediately. With 2 weeks' notice, I wouldn't be obligated to stay. The CEO skimmed my incomplete list during our morning meeting. "Where are the West Coast accounts?" "I'm not familiar with those," I replied, keeping my expression steady. "She managed them herself." His jaw tightened. "Search her files." "We need those clients." For an entire week, I pretended to dig while privately meeting with the clients I'd inherited. Each evening, Bryce demanded progress. Each morning, I informed him I'd uncovered nothing. The company grew frantic. The quarterly projections looked grim without those contracts. The executive team crowded into closed-door discussions. Then came my termination. Bryce could barely hide his triumph, assuming I'd be crushed. Now, as I placed the last of my belongings into the box, Nell touched my arm. "What will you do now?" I smiled. "I have a few ideas. If you're enjoying this story so far and want to see what unfolds next, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I promise Kenna's journey is just beginning, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Drop a comment with what you think she should do after being fired like this. My name is Kenna Ellis, and until today, I was a senior account manager at one of the most respected firms in the city. Not the most dazzling title, but I made it work. I'm 32, single by choice, and driven in ways that often unsettled my coworkers. Growing up in a tiny coastal town taught me patience. Watching my mother run a modest shop while raising 2 kids on her own taught me resourcefulness. 4 years at State College on scholarships drilled perseverance into me, and 5 years at this company taught me that playing by the rules is a privilege reserved for those who design them. Verity recognized that truth in me from the start. While other executives saw a quiet employee who followed instructions, she saw the calculations behind my eyes. The first time she called me into her office, I thought it was for a reprimand. Instead, she asked what I thought about a proposal the team had celebrated that morning. "It's fundamentally flawed," I said, startled by my own bluntness. Instead of taking offense, she smiled. "Explain." I walked her through 3 major weaknesses in the proposal that everyone else had overlooked. When I finished, she gave a single nod. "Tomorrow, you'll join me in the client meeting. Say exactly what you just said. No sugarcoating. The client deserves honest expertise. That's what we're paid to deliver." The next day, the client thanked us for our candor and signed a larger contract than originally planned, specifically requesting that I be involved in implementation. That moment marked the start of our working partnership. Verity became my mentor. Though neither of us ever said the word, she pushed me, challenged me, and entrusted me with increasingly significant responsibilities. When I produced a 30% jump in my portfolio's revenue while others struggled to hold their numbers, I expected acknowledgement. Instead, Bryce was promoted to team lead despite his average performance. "You have to play their game," a female coworker advised. "Laugh at their jokes, join their happy hours, make them feel at ease." I tried, for a while, spent nights nursing drinks I didn't want, listening to stories that weren't funny, pretending to care about golf tournaments that meant nothing to me. It changed nothing. When the next promotion went to Quinn, who'd been with the company half as long, Verity called me into her office again. "Stop trying to be one of them," she said. "They've already decided who you are, which is a threat." I laughed. "I'm not threatening anyone. You outperform them consistently without playing their games. That's the most threatening thing you could do." She was right. My results spoke loudly, but numbers couldn't penetrate the invisible walls. I watched male colleagues take credit for my ideas in meetings, interrupting me only to rephrase exactly what I'd said, earning approving nods. I endured clients directing questions to junior male coworkers instead of me, despite my seniority. And through it all, I kept breaking records, winning business, making the company money they eagerly accepted while refusing me advancement. Verity understood. As the sole female executive, she'd fought the same battles for decades. She'd earned a level of success that demanded respect, but never true acceptance. I watched her navigate boardrooms where her suggestions were dismissed until a man repeated them. I saw her shut out of golf outings where real decisions were made. "Don't make my mistakes," she once told me. I waited for them to acknowledge my worth. Don't wait. But I didn't know what the alternative looked like until the day she told me her diagnosis. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, 6 months at most. She had kept it hidden from everyone except her doctor, and now me. "Why tell me?" I asked, still trying to absorb it. "Because I need your help," she answered, "and because you deserve more than what they'll give you after I'm gone." Her plan was both simple and bold. The West Coast portfolio consisted of 23 clients she had personally nurtured over 15 years, small to mid-sized companies that collectively generated $1.2 million in annual revenue, not the flashy accounts executives bragged about at quarterly presentations, but steady, loyal clients who valued genuine attention. "These relationships are built on trust," she explained. "When I'm gone, the company will divide them among team leads who have zero connection with these clients. Half will leave within a year." "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "I want you to inherit them." The next day began our careful choreography. Verity began introducing me to these clients as her trusted associate. We traveled to meetings together, her teaching me each client's background, preferences, and pain points. To the company, it simply looked like she was finally delegating some of her workload due to health concerns she'd vaguely mentioned. In truth, she was handing me her most valuable asset: client trust. Zara from the boutique tech startup warmed to me instantly. "Verity never brings anyone to our meetings. You must be special." "Kenna sees things others overlook," Verity replied calmly. Matteo, whose sustainable packaging business was expanding quickly, was more blunt. "Are you taking over for Verity?" "Just supporting for now," I answered, sticking to our agreed script. "Good. I hate explaining things twice." By the third month, I understood every client's business almost as well as Verity did. By the fourth month, some were calling me directly instead of her. By the fifth month, we were ready for the legal side. "Everything must be documented properly," Verity insisted. "They'll challenge you otherwise." We met with her personal attorney, not the company's legal department. Papers were drafted, signatures notarized, client permissions secured. One by one, the accounts were officially transferred to me as the primary contact. The company remained unaware, focused on bigger accounts and quarterly numbers. As Verity started coming into the office less often, citing medical appointments, no one questioned my increase in client meetings. They assumed I was covering temporarily. Only Bryce seemed suspicious, demanding more detailed reports. The executive team needs visibility into these accounts, he pressed. I provided only surface-level updates, nothing that revealed the depth of my new client relationships. Verity had warned me about him specifically. Bryce has been trying to get his hands on my portfolio for years, she'd said. He knows those clients mean stability. 2 weeks before her death, Verity asked me to visit her home. I'd never been there and was surprised by its modest size and functional furnishings. No extravagance despite her executive pay. I live within my means, she explained, noticing my reaction. Financial independence gives you options. Remember that. On her dining table sat the final documents, official transfer of the client relationships to me personally, not to the company. All fully executed. Is this even legal? I asked, stunned by the thoroughness of the paperwork. Completely. I'm transferring relationships I built, not company property. That distinction matters. She slid the documents toward me. Keep these somewhere safe, away from home and work. I secured a safety deposit box that same afternoon. They'll come for you after I'm gone, she warned, her voice weaker than ever. Be ready. 3 days later, her assistant called me sobbing. Verity had suffered a heart attack in her sleep. She was gone. The company's reaction was immediate. A polished email announcement, a donation to cancer research in her honor, a team meeting where the CEO praised her contributions before quickly shifting to maintaining client relationships during this transition. At her funeral, I stood apart from my coworkers, watching their carefully performed grief. The CEO delivered a refined eulogy that somehow made Verity's accomplishments sound like they were the company's own. Bryce approached me afterward, his expression sympathetic while his eyes remained cold. Such a loss, he murmured. We'll need to talk about transitioning her account soon. I nodded, gaze lowered. Whatever the company requires. That evening brought the CEO's text, insisting on the full client list. The next morning, I delivered the edited version, leaving out all 23 West Coast clients. Where are the West Coast accounts? He asked, scowling at the list. I'm not familiar with those, I lied calmly. She managed them personally. His jaw tightened. Search her files. We need those clients. For the following week, I conducted an exhaustive search of Verity's office, finding nothing because nothing remained. She had been meticulous in erasing every trace of those specific client ties. Meanwhile, I spent my lunch breaks and evenings visiting my new clients, reassuring them through the transition. Each one expressed sorrow over Verity's death. Most added how relieved they were to still have me. Continuity is everything in business, Matteo said during our coffee meeting. If they'd assigned someone new, I would have left. Each day, Bryce became more unsettled. The quarterly forecast grew increasingly bleak without those accounts. The executive team held closed-door meetings that ended with somber faces and muted conversations that died the moment I passed. Then came my termination meeting, the outcome of their irritation and my preparation. As I carried my box of belongings toward the elevator, Bryce approached once more. Before you go, he said, voice low and tense, where are those West Coast files? This isn't personal, it's business. The company needs those accounts. I set down my box and met his stare directly. I have no idea what you're referring to. Don't start this, Kenna. Those clients bring in over $1 million a year. They belong to the company. I lifted my box again. Actually, they belong to whoever chooses to work with them. His face reddened. Is that a threat? Just a fact, I answered, stepping into the elevator. As the doors shut on his furious expression, I allowed myself a faint smile. The dismissal I'd been anticipating had finally come. But contrary to what Bryce and the executive team assumed, this wasn't the close of my story. It was only the start. The morning after my termination, I woke before my alarm. The strange quiet of not rushing to the office wrapped around me like an unfamiliar comfort. For the first time in 5 years, I was unemployed. Technically, in truth, I was freer than I'd been in ages. I made coffee and took it onto my tiny balcony, watching the city rise. My phone buzzed with worried messages from the few coworkers I'd been close to. Nell had already sent 3 texts, each more anxious than the last. I replied briefly, "I'm fine. Better than fine." The truth was, I'd been bracing for this day for months. The night before Verity's funeral, I'd opened a business checking account. 2 days later, I'd filed the paperwork for my new limited liability company. 3 weeks after that, I'd secured a small office in a converted warehouse by the waterfront, just steps from 5 of my new clients. All of it had been done quietly, deliberately, following Verity's clear instructions. "Don't hurry," she'd warned. "Let them reveal their true nature first." And they had. Brilliantly. My phone rang, an unfamiliar number. I paused before answering. Kenna Ellis speaking. "Miss Ellis, this is Gavin Stewart, Chief Legal Counsel for—" "I know who you are, Gavin," I cut in. We'd crossed paths at several company events, though he'd never once recalled my name. "Yes. Well," he cleared his throat. "There appears to be some confusion regarding certain client relationships previously overseen by Verity Winters. The company would like to arrange a meeting to resolve these issues." "There's no confusion on my end," I replied, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "Perhaps I'm not being understood. These client relationships belong to the company. Any attempt to reroute them would be considered theft of proprietary business assets." I'd been ready for this. Verity had warned me. "I have no intention of discussing this further without my attorney present," I said evenly. "Any future communication should go through her office." I gave him the contact information for Lorai Chan, the attorney Verity had introduced me to. "This can be settled peacefully," Gavin said, his tone softening to something almost cordial. "The company is willing to offer you a consulting agreement to assist in transitioning these accounts. Goodbye, Gavin." I ended the call and blocked the number. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. The CEO this time. I let it go to voicemail. His message was terse. "Kenna, this is a serious issue. Call me back immediately." Instead, I texted Mateo. "Still on for our 10 a.m. meeting?" His response came instantly. "Absolutely. Bringing the new product samples." I showered and dressed with intention, choosing a sharp charcoal pantsuit Verity had once admired. "Power isn't about fitting in," she'd told me. "It's about holding your position." The temporary office I'd leased wasn't fully furnished yet. Just a desk, 2 chairs, and a modest conference table, but the harbor view compensated for the bare interior. Mateo arrived exactly at 10, carrying a box of prototype packaging. "Nice spot," he said, scanning the room. "Bit empty though, for now," I said. "I'm keeping it lean." Mateo set his samples on the conference table. "Got a call from your old company this morning. Some guy named Bryce." My heart skipped. "What did he want?" "To set up an urgent meeting about our account. Said there'd been a restructuring and he'd be taking over." Mateo shrugged. "I told him we're satisfied with our current arrangement." "And how did he react to that?" "He said there must be a misunderstanding, that all client contracts are with the company, not individual reps." Mateo chuckled. I told him to review his documents again. I smiled, feeling a flush of satisfaction. "And did he?" "Must have." He went very quiet, then said he'd follow up later. Mateo opened his sample box. "Enough of that. Let me show you what we've been developing." By noon, I'd secured meetings with 5 more clients for the next day. By 3, emails arrived from 7 others, all describing similar calls from either Bryce or another executive at my former company. At 4, Lorai called. "They're threatening legal action," she said, without any lead-in, citing breach of contract, client poaching, and misappropriation of trade secrets. Exactly what Verity predicted, I answered. Yes, and exactly what we planned for. I've rechecked all the paperwork again. The client transfers were handled correctly with full disclosure to and approval from each client. You never signed a non-compete agreement, and there are no trade secrets at play since all client details were either publicly accessible or provided directly by the clients themselves. So we're secure. Completely. But they don't realize that yet. They're bluffing, counting on you to panic. What's our next step? Let them rant. I've requested all relevant records from their legal department. That'll stall them while they scramble to locate documents that don't exist. After the call ended, I moved toward the window, watching boats drift across the harbor. Verity had adored this view when we toured this office space together just weeks before she died. She'd stood in this exact spot. Remember, Kenna, she'd told me, when they understand what's happening, intimidation comes first. When that fails, they'll try to buy you. And when that fails, she'd turn to me, her face hollow but her eyes still blazing. That's when they'll reveal exactly who they are. My phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. Kenna, it's Quinn. Can we talk? Not company business, just talk. Quinn, the one who'd gotten the promotion I should have had. We'd never been close, though he'd always been less overtly political than the others. Still, I paused before answering. When and where? His reply came fast. Tonight? That cafe near your old apartment? I frowned. How did he know where I used to live? I'd moved 6 months ago, and I'd never mentioned my new place at work. The Copper Kettle at 7, I typed back, choosing a cafe in a busy shopping district instead. I arrived early, selecting a table with a clean view of both the entrance and the back exit. Quinn entered at exactly 7, scanning the room until he saw me. He looked worn down, the usual certainty in his stride gone. Thanks for meeting me, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. What's going on, Quinn? He ordered a coffee before continuing. Things are chaotic at the office. The executive team is in total freefall, and that worries me. Why? They're saying you stole clients, that you and Verity plotted to cheat the company. He leaned in. They're putting together a case against you. There is no case. They've sifted through 5 years of emails trying to find anything. They're questioning everyone who worked with you, asking if you ever talked about taking clients. I kept my face calm. And why should that concern me? Quinn exhaled. Look, I know we weren't close, but what they're doing, it's wrong. They're attempting to ruin you professionally. Why warn me? He stared into his coffee for a long beat. Because Verity once did something similar for me. She warned me when they were setting me up to fail. I blinked at that. Quinn had always seemed like one of them, driven, strategic, willing to play their games. I owe her, he said quietly. And by extension, you. What exactly are they doing? They're contacting every client, claiming you lied about having authority to move the accounts. They're offering massive discounts to keep the relationships. And they're preparing to send cease and desist letters to all 23 businesses. I nodded slowly. Anything else? They've frozen Verity's final compensation, alleging supposed misconduct. They're using it as leverage against her family. A wave of anger tightened in my chest. Verity's sister had 2 kids in college. That money was meant for them. Thank you for telling me, I said at last. Quinn hesitated. There's one more thing. They offered me a bonus. A substantial one. In exchange for supplying evidence against you. And will you? There isn't any evidence to give. He stood to go. I was never here. You never saw me. After he left, I sat alone, absorbing everything he'd revealed. They were far more desperate than I'd expected. Targeting Verity's family crossed a line even they shouldn't have crossed. I called Lorei again. "They're freezing Verity's final payment," I said as soon as she picked up. "I just heard the same from her sister's attorney," Lorei replied. "They're alleging breach of fiduciary duty." Can they actually do that? They can attempt it. It won't hold in court, but it could stall the funds for months. Which is exactly what they want. Her sister needs that money now. I know. I'm handling it. I hung up and drove home, my thoughts spiraling. This wasn't just about me now. They were punishing Verity's family to pressure me. The realization settled like iron in my stomach. The next morning, an email arrived from the CEO himself, asking for a private meeting to resolve things amicably. I forwarded it to Lorei without replying. Her response came quickly. "They're panicking. The legal threats failed. Now they're trying charm. Stick to the plan." The plan, Verity's plan, now mine. A precise sequence meant to give me maximum leverage when the moment arrived. We were still early in that timeline, yet the company was reacting exactly as she'd predicted. By the end of the week, all 23 clients confirmed they were staying with me. My number had been blocked from receiving calls from any company line, and Lorei was filtering all legal communication. The initial fear had dissolved, replaced by steady resolve. I spent my days meeting clients, setting up a proper workspace, and laying the groundwork for my new business. My evenings were devoted to strategy. I slept better than I had in years. Then came the first real obstacle. Zara called Friday afternoon, her voice tight with anxiety. "Kenna, we have a problem. Your old employer is telling our investors the contract transfer wasn't legitimate. They're saying it could jeopardize our entire funding round." My hand clenched around the phone. "That's absolutely untrue." "I know, but our lead investor is rattled. They're considering pulling their support unless this is cleared up." Zara's startup had just secured critical second-round financing. Losing it would be catastrophic. "Give me your investor's contact information," I said. "I'll have Lorei reach out immediately." She hesitated. "There's more," Zara continued. "They've offered to cut our service fees by 40% if we return. It's hard to ignore in our position." This was the first crack in the wall. If Zara gave in, others might follow. "I understand," I said cautiously. "That's a huge discount, but we don't want to leave you," she added quickly. "You and Verity have been with us from the start. We trust you." "Let me see what I can do," I promised. After hanging up, I paced my small office. This was an escalation I hadn't fully anticipated. They were going after the most vulnerable clients first, the startups facing investor pressure and tight budgets. I called Lorei again, explaining the situation. "They're playing hardball," she agreed. "But so can we." "How?" "I can't match a 40% discount. I don't have their resources." "No, but you have something they don't." I could hear her smile through the line. "You have Verity's contingency plan, I think." The next morning, I invited Zara to my office. When she arrived, Lorei was already there along with a man I'd never met. Tall, silver-haired, carrying the air of someone used to command. "Zara, this is Ambrose Tanner," I said, Verity's former mentor and founder of her first investment group. Zara's eyes widened. Ambrose Tanner was something of a legend in startup circles, an early investor in dozens of now successful companies. "Miss Daswani," he said, extending his hand. "Verity spoke highly of your innovation." "Mr. Tanner," she stammered, "I had no idea you were involved with Kenna's company." "I wasn't, until yesterday," he replied, glancing at me. "But Verity asked me to monitor certain situations that might arise after her passing. Your current predicament qualifies." For the next hour, Ambrose laid out a potential partnership that would not only resolve Zara's immediate investor concerns but potentially accelerate her company's growth timeline. By the time she left, the crisis had become an opportunity. "Thank you," I said to Ambrose after Zara departed. "Verity never mentioned she'd spoken to you about this." Verity kept many cards close. He replied. She reached out to me shortly before her death, explained her plan for you, and asked if I'd step in if certain situations arose. And you agreed, just like that? Ambrose's expression softened. Verity saved my company 20 years ago when everyone else had written me off. I owed her. Besides, he added with a small smile, I've been watching those executives mishandle talent for years. It's time someone taught them a lesson. Over the next 2 weeks, similar scenarios played out with other vulnerable clients. When my former company targeted them with steep discounts or investor pressure, I found ways to strengthen relationships rather than simply maintain them. For WDE's custom furniture business, I connected him with 3 new retail partners. For Lark's organic skincare line, I arranged a feature in a major lifestyle publication. Each solution was customized to the client's needs, demonstrating a level of personal attention my former company couldn't match. The executive team's tactics became increasingly desperate. They tried calling my clients outside business hours, spread rumors about my company's finances, and even sent a junior account manager to my office building to intercept clients arriving for meetings. Through it all, I stayed calm, just as Verity had modeled. Never let them see you sweat, she had advised. The moment you react emotionally, they think they've won. 3 weeks after my termination, another email arrived from the CEO, marked urgent and confidential. This has gone far enough. It read, We're prepared to offer you a partnership with full executive privileges if you return the West Coast accounts to company management. This offer expires in 48 hours. I forwarded it to Lori with a single question. Time. Her reply was just as brief. Almost. That evening, I spread every piece of documentation across my dining table: client contracts, transfer agreements, email threads, meeting notes. Everything meticulously organized and preserved. 5 months of careful preparation had led to this exact moment. My phone rang. Bryce's number. I answered, curiosity piqued. The CEO's offer is genuine, he said immediately, no greeting. Full partnership? Corner office? Executive compensation package? Sounds generous, I replied. It's more than generous. It's unprecedented. And what would my role be in this partnership? He hesitated. Strategic client management, he finally said, meaning you'd bring back the West Coast accounts, but wouldn't actually oversee them. Details are negotiable. Of course, I echoed. And you? What's your role in this arrangement? Another pause. I've been asked to facilitate the transition, he admitted, meaning you've been told to get me to agree at any cost, because the quarterly numbers are due next week and the executive team is panicking. The silence confirmed my assessment. The offer expires tomorrow, he added. I suggest you consider it carefully. I always do. After hanging up, I sent a text to Lori. They've offered partnership. Getting desperate. Her reply came instantly. Perfect. Exactly on schedule. Meet tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bring everything. The next morning, I arrived at Lori's office carrying a briefcase packed with documents. She was waiting with a colleague I hadn't met before, a serious-looking woman introduced simply as Diane from the Financial Crimes Unit.